The Great Council Chamber of the Galactic Empire was a place of wonder and ancient power. Thousands of species had walked through its crystal doors over the centuries, their footsteps echoing in halls that had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations. They came to join the empire, to trade valuable resources, to make peace after terrible wars, or sometimes to beg for mercy when they had angered the wrong powers. But today was different from all those other days. Today, the newest species to reach the stars had come to introduce themselves, and none who gathered in that great chamber could have known how much this moment would change everything. Ambassador Crixtal of the Vithrani watched the human delegation enter the chamber with his 4 compound eyes, each one capable of seeing different spectrums of light. The Vithrani were old members of the Empire, among the founding species who had helped create the great civilization that now spanned half the galaxy. They had seen many species come and go over their long history. Some had risen to greatness and contributed much to the collective knowledge of the stars. Others had faded away, unable to adapt to the demands of galactic civilization. Had studied the humans for several weeks before this meeting, and he found them strange but not particularly threatening. They walked on 2 legs, which was common enough. They had soft skin with no scales or armor, which was less common but not unknown. And they seemed to have no natural weapons, no claws to tear through metal, no venom to paralyze enemies, no armor plates to deflect energy weapons. They seemed like prey animals who had somehow learned to build starships and travel between worlds. The human ambassador was a female named Sarah Chen. She walked calmly to the center of the chamber and bowed to the assembled representatives, a gesture of respect that translated well across most cultures. Behind her stood 3 other humans, 2 males and 1 female, all wearing simple gray uniforms that bore no weapons and displayed no military rank. They looked around the chamber with curious eyes, taking in the hundreds of alien species that surrounded them, showing no fear despite being vastly outnumbered and far from home. High Counselor Vexthun, a massive creature with 6 powerful legs and a shell of blue metal that gleamed under the chamber lights, raised one of his clawed appendages to bring the chamber to silence. He was the leader of the council, chosen for his wisdom and his ability to balance the competing interests of dozens of species. His word was law in this place. "Welcome, humans of Earth," Vexthun said through the translation device that converted his clicking speech into sounds the humans could understand. "You have traveled far to reach us, crossing the vast emptiness between stars to stand in this ancient hall. The Galactic Empire welcomes all species who come in peace and wish to contribute to our shared civilization. Tell us about your world and your people so that we may know you better." Sarah Chen smiled. It was a gesture that showed her teeth, small white bones in her mouth that many species found disturbing. Showing teeth was usually a threat display in the galaxy, a warning that an attack was coming. Several representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but Sarah seemed unaware of their discomfort. "Thank you, High Counselor," Sarah said, her voice calm and measured. "We are deeply honored to be here, to stand in this chamber where so much history has been made. Earth is a small planet in what you call the Outer Rim, far from the center of galactic civilization. We have only been traveling among the stars for 50 of our years. Compared to most of you, we are very young. We have much to learn from the wisdom you have gathered over countless generations." A sound like rustling leaves came from the Florani delegation. They were plant-like beings who communicated through the movement of their fronds, creating complex patterns that conveyed meaning. They had been traveling among stars for so long that they had forgotten their original homeworld. The translation device converted their words. Young indeed. The Florani were building ships capable of reaching other star systems when your ancestors were still living in caves, fighting with sticks and stones. Sarah nodded gracefully, accepting the statement without offense. "That is absolutely true. We have much to learn from all of you, and we come here hoping to be good students of your accumulated wisdom." Crixtal clicked his mandibles in approval. The humans were humble, which was wise of them. Arrogant species rarely lasted long in the Empire. He had seen 3 civilizations destroy themselves through pride in his lifetime alone, species who believed they were superior to all others and learned too late how wrong they were. "We have reviewed your application for membership," Vexthun continued, his voice taking on a more formal tone. "Your technology is basic but acceptable. Your population is small but growing at a healthy rate. However, we must ask some questions before we can proceed further. The Empire has strict rules about warfare and violence. We have learned through bitter experience that aggressive species can cause tremendous damage if they are not properly controlled." "We understand completely," Sarah said. "We are prepared to answer any questions you have. Your records show that your species has a long history of conflict, wars between your own nations, conflicts that killed millions of your own kind. This concerns us greatly. A species that fights itself so readily might bring that violence to others." Sarah's expression changed slightly, becoming more serious. "Yes, humans have fought many wars throughout our history, brother against brother, nation against nation. We are not proud of this dark chapter of our past, but we have learned from our mistakes. We have had global peace for 20 years now, our longest period of unity in recorded history." "That is good to hear," Vexthun said. "But we must understand the nature of your species at its deepest level. What drove your ancestors? What survival strategies did they use when they were still evolving on your homeworld? This helps us predict how you will behave as members of the Empire. Every species carries the instincts of their ancestors, even after they have built cities and ships." Leaned forward in his seat, genuinely interested. This was always the most fascinating part of any new species introduction. Every species had its own unique story of survival, shaped by the conditions of their homeworld. The Vithrani had survived through overwhelming numbers and perfect cooperation, working together like a single organism. The Florani had survived through infinite patience and slow adaptation, changing over millions of years to fit their environment. The Kreks had survived through natural armor and deadly poison, making themselves too dangerous to attack. Each species found its own path through the dangers of evolution. Sarah turned to look at her fellow humans. They exchanged glances that seemed to carry some meaning Crystal could not read, some shared understanding that passed between them in silence. Then Sarah turned back to the council, and when she spoke, her voice had a different quality to it. "Our ancestors were persistent hunters," she said simply. Crystal's translator took a moment to process this unfamiliar term. When the meaning came through, he felt confused. He was not the only one showing this reaction. Murmurs spread through the chamber as representatives consulted with each other, trying to understand what this phrase meant. "Please explain further," Vexthun said. "What exactly is persistence hunting? We are not familiar with this term." Sarah took a deep breath before answering, as if preparing for something difficult. "On Earth, many millions of years ago, our ancestors developed a unique hunting strategy unlike anything else on our planet. They could not run as fast as their prey. The animals they needed to eat could easily outrun them in a short race. They had no claws or fangs to catch these animals if they got close. They were not strong enough to fight most creatures directly, so they found another way to survive." She paused, and the chamber was completely silent now. Every representative was listening intently. "They chased their prey," Sarah continued. "Not quickly, not in a sprint that would end in seconds or minutes, slowly, steadily. They followed animals for hours without stopping, sometimes for entire days across vast distances. When the animal ran away at top speed, they walked toward it. When the animal stopped to rest, thinking it was safe, they kept coming closer. They never stopped moving. They could not catch the animal in a short chase, that was impossible, but they did not need to catch it quickly. They simply needed to keep following until the animal collapsed from exhaustion and could no longer run." Felt something strange happening to him. A chill ran through his exoskeleton, a sensation he had not experienced since he was a young member of his species facing his first predator. He looked around and saw similar reactions from other representatives throughout the chamber. The Florani had gone very still, their fronds frozen in place. The Kreks were shifting nervously despite their armored bodies. The Melani, a species known for their incredible speed, looked absolutely terrified. "I do not understand," said Vexthun, but his voice had lost some of its usual confidence. "How is this even possible? Any prey animal can outrun a predator if the predator is slower. This is basic logic. The prey runs away and the predator cannot catch it. How can you hunt something that is faster than you?" "In a sprint, yes, the prey always escapes," Sarah said. "But humans do not sprint when they hunt. We have a cooling system that most animals do not possess. We sweat. Our bodies release water through millions of tiny holes in our skin, and when this water evaporates, it carries away the heat our muscles generate. Most animals cannot do this. They must stop running and pant heavily to cool down their bodies, or they will overheat and die. But humans can keep moving steadily while cooling ourselves. We can walk and run for hours without our bodies overheating." The chamber remained absolutely quiet. "We also have large brains," Sarah continued. "Our ancestors could track their prey across any terrain. They could remember where the animal went even when they lost sight of it. They could read the signs it left behind, the footprints, the broken branches, the scent on the wind. They could work together in groups, taking turns to follow the animal so that each hunter could rest while others kept up the chase. The prey could never rest safely. It would run until it thought it was safe, and humans would appear on the horizon. It would hide in the brush, and humans would find it and flush it out. It would collapse from exhaustion, unable to take another step, and humans would be there waiting." A representative from the Sketh Collective, a species that looked like large insects with shimmering wings, spoke up in a voice that trembled slightly. "But this method is barbaric. This is torture of the cruelest kind. Chasing an animal until it dies of exhaustion, denying it any rest or escape. This is not hunting, this is something far worse." Sarah's expression remained calm and steady. "It was survival. Our ancestors needed food to live. They had no claws to catch prey quickly. They had no venom to bring it down. They did what they had to do to survive in a harsh world that gave them no other options." "For how long could your ancestors chase prey?" Vexthun asked, and could hear real fear in the High Counselor's voice now. "The longest recorded persistence hunts lasted more than 30 hours of continuous pursuit," Sarah said, "covering distances of 50 to 70 kilometers across open terrain. But those were extreme cases for the largest and fastest prey. Most hunts ended within 8 to 12 hours after covering perhaps 40 kilometers. Did the calculations quickly in his head. 12 hours of continuous chase without stopping. He could not run for 12 minutes without needing to rest and catch his breath. The Vithrani were not built for endurance. Neither were most species in the galaxy. Their survival strategies had been based on speed, or armor, or poison, or hiding. None of them had ever conceived of a predator that simply refused to stop. He looked at the humans with entirely new eyes now. They stood there in the center of the chamber, 4 soft creatures with no armor plating, no weapons built into their bodies, no obvious threats that any scanner would detect. But now he saw something else beneath that harmless exterior. He saw creatures who would never stop coming once they started, who would follow you across any distance, through any terrain, past any obstacle, who would wait outside your hiding place with infinite patience until you had to move again, and then follow you once more. "Is this persistence instinct still part of human behavior?" asked a representative from the Melani, a species of furry quadrupeds who were renowned throughout the galaxy for their incredible running speed. The Melani representative looked very uncomfortable now, his large ears pressed flat against his skull in a gesture of deep anxiety. Sarah hesitated before answering, choosing her words carefully. "We no longer hunt animals this way. Our technology has made such hunting unnecessary for thousands of years. But the traits that made persistence hunting possible remain encoded in our bodies and our minds. Humans are built for endurance in ways that surprise even us sometimes. We can walk and run for very long distances without stopping. We heal quickly from injuries that would permanently disable other species. We can function with less sleep than most species require. We can operate in a wider range of temperatures than almost any other intelligent species we know of. She paused and smiled again, and this time saw those exposed teeth very differently. Not as a threat display, not as a warning of attack, but as a promise of what was to come if you ran. And we are very, very stubborn, Sarah added. When humans want something, when we set our minds to a goal, we do not give up easily. We keep trying. We keep coming. We keep pushing until we succeed or until we die. It is deeply ingrained in our nature, part of who we are at our most fundamental level. The chamber erupted in worried conversation, dozens of species all talking at once in their various languages, creating a cacophony of sound that the translators struggled to process. Sat back in his seat and watched the humans carefully. They stood calmly in the center of the chaos, seemingly unaware of how much their simple explanation had just changed the galaxy's perception of them. The High Counselor called for order, but it took a very long time for the noise to die down. When it finally did, Vexthun looked at the humans with an expression that Crystal had never seen on his leader's face before in all the years he had served on the council. It looked very much like fear. 3 days passed after the human presentation, and the council remained in turmoil. Crystal spent most of that time in his quarters on the space station, reading everything he could find about Earth and its dominant species. The more he read, the more disturbed and fascinated he became in equal measure. The humans had not told the full story in their presentation. Of course they had not. No species revealed everything about themselves when they first applied for membership. Diplomacy required careful management of information, but the truth was there in the records if you knew where to look and how to interpret what you found. Earth was a death world. This term was not used lightly in the Galactic Empire. Planets were classified by their danger level, ranked on a scale from 1 to 10. Most intelligent species evolved on what were called garden worlds, planets with stable climates, gentle seasons, and predictable conditions that allowed complex life to flourish safely. The Vithrani homeworld was a garden world, ranked at 2 on the danger scale. So were the homeworlds of the Florani, the Melani, and most other Empire members. These were peaceful places, where evolution had proceeded slowly and carefully. But Earth was different. Earth was ranked at 8 on the danger scale, higher than any other world that had produced intelligent life. Earth had extreme temperatures that varied wildly across its surface and through its seasons. Some parts of the planet were cold enough to freeze water solid, creating vast sheets of ice that could trap and kill any creature not adapted to such conditions. Other parts were hot enough to kill most galactic species within minutes of exposure. The planet had violent storms that could destroy entire cities, spinning columns of wind that tore buildings apart, massive walls of water that drowned coastlines without warning. It had earthquakes that split the ground open and swallowed entire communities. It had mountains that exploded with fire and buried regions under molten rock. It had massive waves called tsunamis that could travel across entire oceans and devastate everything in their path. And the life forms that had evolved on this hellish world were just as extreme as their environment. Read about creatures called bears, massive predators covered in thick fur that could tear through metal with their claws and crush bones with their jaws. He read about sharks, fish with rows of serrated teeth that could smell a single drop of blood dissolved in millions of parts of water. He read about venomous snakes whose poison could kill in minutes, poisonous spiders that lurked in dark corners, and creatures called crocodiles that had survived unchanged for hundreds of millions of years, because they were already perfect killing machines that needed no improvement. The humans had not just survived on this planet filled with nightmares. They had conquered it completely. They had become the dominant predator on a world full of monsters, not through strength or speed or natural weapons, but through persistence and intelligence and absolute refusal to accept defeat. But what disturbed Crystal most was what he learned about human endurance when they were not being chased by predators or hunting for food. The presentation had mentioned persistence hunting, but the records showed much more about what humans could do when they chose to push themselves. Humans had developed competitions based purely on endurance, events where the only goal was to see how far or how long a human could keep moving. They ran races covering hundreds of kilometers through burning deserts. They swam across entire oceans, spending days in cold water filled with dangerous creatures. They climbed mountains so high that there was not enough oxygen to breathe, carrying their own air supplies on their backs. And they did these things for fun, for entertainment, to see if they could. One record showed a human who had run across an entire continent, covering more than 4,000 kilometers in 46 days of nearly continuous movement. Another showed humans who had walked to both poles of their planet, through temperatures that would kill any Vithrani in seconds of exposure. There were humans who had spent years traveling through hostile wilderness alone, crossing environments that would be considered uninhabitable by any reasonable standard. There was a human saying that Crystal found particularly troubling as he researched their philosophy: "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger." This was not how evolution worked for most species in the galaxy. For most species, dangerous experiences were things to be avoided at all costs. Survival meant staying away from threats, seeking safety, protecting yourself from harm. The instinct was to run from danger, to hide from predators, to avoid any situation that might cause injury or death. But humans seemed to actively seek out challenges and dangers. They deliberately put themselves in risky situations to become tougher, more capable, more resilient. They believed that suffering made them better, that pain was a teacher, that nearly dying taught valuable lessons about living. This explained so much about their rapid development. In just 50 years, they had gone from primitive rockets to faster-than-light travel. They had adapted to new environments, new challenges, new technologies with a speed that other species found almost incomprehensible. Because adapting quickly, learning from hardship, pushing past what seemed possible, these were traits that had been bred into them over millions of years of persistence hunting on a death world. Crystal closed his reading device and looked out the window of his quarters at the peaceful scene beyond. The station they were on orbited a beautiful garden world, its surface a patchwork of green continents and blue oceans under a gentle yellow sun. It was beautiful and safe, and exactly the kind of world the Vithrani had always preferred. He wondered what Earth looked like from orbit. He suspected it would be beautiful too, with its own mix of blue and green and white clouds. But now he knew that beauty hid something terrifying beneath its surface. A chime at his door interrupted his dark thoughts. He gave permission to enter, and his assistant Valkyrie scurried into the room quickly. "Ambassador," Valkyrie said, his voice carrying worry, "you have been requested at an emergency council meeting." "Emergency? What has happened now?" "I do not know the details, but it involves the humans." Crystal clicked his mandibles in concern. He had a feeling he already knew what this meeting would be about. The emergency meeting was held in a smaller chamber than the main council hall, a more intimate space designed for serious discussions away from the spectacle of formal proceedings. Only the senior representatives were present, about 50 beings from the most powerful and influential species in the Empire. The humans were pointedly not invited. High Counselor Vexthun stood at the center of the room, his blue metallic shell catching the light as he moved. He looked tired in a way that was unusual for a member of his species, and Crystal wondered how much sleep the counselor had gotten in the past 3 days. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Vexthun said, his voice heavy with the weight of responsibility. "I have called this meeting to discuss the human application for membership. As you are all aware, their presentation 3 days ago raised some significant concerns that we must address." "Concerns?" interrupted Lord Kethver of the Krex, his voice booming through the chamber. He was a massive creature, all armor plates and claws, and barely contained aggression. The Krex were the warrior species of the Empire, feared throughout the galaxy for their strength and ferocity in battle. They are prey animals who learn to walk upright, soft, weak, without natural weapons. I do not see why we should waste time being concerned about such creatures. Have you actually read the intelligence reports that have been compiled? Asked Fleet Admiral Zextani of the Melani, her voice sharp with impatience. Unlike the Krex, the Melani believed in knowing everything about potential threats. They were fast, smart, and always thoroughly prepared. The humans are absolutely not prey animals. They are something else entirely, something we have never encountered before. They have no natural weapons, Kethver said dismissively, flexing his massive claws. They cannot match the Krex in combat, therefore they are not worthy of our concern. They do not need natural weapons, Zextani replied with obvious frustration. They build weapons. They have nuclear devices that can destroy entire cities in a single explosion. They have biological agents that can kill millions if released into a population. They have developed weapons we have not even fully analyzed yet. And most importantly, they have the patience and determination to use these weapons over generations if necessary. The chamber went very quiet at this last statement. I believe we are missing the larger and more important point, said Elder Floreth of the Florani, his fronds moving slowly and deliberately as he spoke. The humans have revealed their fundamental nature to us, persistence hunters. This is not merely a hunting strategy from their past. It is a philosophy, a way of approaching all problems, a mindset that shapes everything they do. Please explain what you mean, said Vexthon. Think carefully about what persistence hunting requires, Floreth continued. First, you must be able to endure, to keep moving forward when every part of your body wants to stop and rest. This requires tremendous willpower that few species possess. Second, you must be patient beyond all reason. You cannot catch your prey immediately, so you must be willing to wait hours, even days, never losing focus. Third, and most importantly, you must be absolutely certain of your eventual success. If you doubt even for a moment that you will catch your prey, you will give up and fail. But if you know, deep in your very being, that you will succeed no matter how long it takes or how difficult the path becomes, then you will never stop. Felt that chill run through his body again. He understood now exactly what Floreth was saying, and the implications were staggering. The humans are not dangerous because they are physically strong or fast, Floreth said. They are clearly not. They are dangerous because they fundamentally do not know how to give up. When they want something, when they set their minds to achieving a goal, they will pursue it with absolute determination until they get it or until they die trying. There is no middle ground, no compromise, no surrender in their nature. Then we should simply not let them into the Empire, said Kethver, his solution as blunt as his claws. It is a simple problem with a simple answer. Is it truly that simple? Asked Zextani. What happens when we reject their application? Do they simply accept our decision and go away? Based on everything we have learned about their nature, I doubt very much that they would accept defeat so easily. They will keep trying to gain acceptance. They will find other ways to achieve their goals, and eventually they will either join the Empire as friends or oppose it as enemies. There is no third option with a species like this. The room erupted in argument as representatives shouted their opinions over each other. Stayed silent throughout the chaos, watching and listening carefully. He could see the fear spreading through the assembled leaders like a disease. These were the rulers of the galaxy's most powerful species, beings who commanded vast fleets and armies and resources beyond counting. They were used to being the ones who inspired fear in others. And now they were afraid of four soft creatures who sweated. Vexthun raised his claws for silence, and eventually the noise died down enough for him to speak. We must reach a decision. Do we accept the humans into the Empire, welcoming them as members, or do we reject their application and hope they go away? Those who favor acceptance, speak now and make your case. The silence stretched for a long moment. No one wanted to be the first to speak in favor of letting these persistent hunters into their civilization. Then Crystal rose slowly to his feet. "I favor acceptance," he said clearly. Every eye in the room turned to him. He felt the weight of their attention pressing down on him, but he did not flinch or back down. "The Vithrani have survived for 10,000 years in this galaxy," Crystal said. "We have survived by understanding both our enemies and our allies, by knowing when to fight and when to make peace. The humans are coming. Whether we accept their application or reject it, they are coming into the galaxy. They have reached the stars on their own, and based on everything we know about their nature, they will not stop expanding until they are either stopped or dead. This is who they are." He paused to let his words sink in before continuing. "So we have a choice before us. We can make the humans our allies, bringing them into the empire where we can guide their development and shape their future. Or we can make them our enemies, forcing them to grow and expand without our guidance or restraint. I know which option I prefer." "You would have us invite these predators into our homes," demanded Kethfer. "You would let wolves into the pen where we keep our young." "I would have us survive," Crystal replied firmly. "The humans have been traveling among the stars for only 50 years. In that short time, they have gone from primitive rockets barely capable of reaching their own moon to faster-than-light travel that rivals our own. They learn more quickly than any species we have ever encountered. They adapt to new challenges with frightening speed. They never stop improving, never stop pushing, never stop reaching for more. If we reject them now, what will they be capable of in another 50 years? In 100? In 500? He paused again to let the implications settle over the room. "Better to have them inside the Empire, where we can guide them and teach them our ways, than outside the Empire, where they might decide that we are standing between them and their goals. Because if the humans ever decided that the Galactic Empire itself was their prey, if they ever turned those persistent hunter instincts against us, I do not think we could outrun them forever. No one can run forever from something that never stops following." The vote was held immediately. It was very close, closer than any membership vote in the Empire's history. Fear fought against fear, the fear of having humans as neighbors balanced against the fear of having them as enemies. In the end, survival won out over pride. The humans were officially accepted into the Galactic Empire. And everything changed from that moment forward. 10 years passed after the humans joined the Empire. In that relatively short time, they spread through galactic civilization like water finding its way through cracks in stone, flowing into every gap in space that would hold them. They were everywhere now. Human traders negotiating in markets on 100 worlds. Human scientists working in research stations across the galaxy. Human diplomats navigating the complex web of interspecies relations with surprising skill. Human soldiers serving alongside warriors from dozens of species. They learned the languages and customs of every species they encountered. They made friends and allies wherever they went, adapting to each new culture they encountered. And they never stopped running. Crystal had become one of the few non-humans who truly understood what this meant. He had spent years studying humans, working alongside them on various projects, even living among them for extended periods. He had visited Earth once, a journey that had changed his perspective forever. He had seen humans run for pleasure across scorching deserts, where the temperature would kill any Vithrani in minutes. He had watched them climb mountains in freezing cold that would shut down his metabolism entirely. He had stood in awe as ordinary humans, not specially trained athletes, completed endurance events that would have killed any member of his species within the first hour of participation. But what struck him most deeply was not their physical capabilities. It was their attitude toward challenge and suffering. "Why do you do this to yourselves?" he had asked a human runner named Marcus after watching him complete a 100-kilometer race through rocky mountain terrain. The man's feet were bleeding through his shoes, his muscles were cramping, and his skin was burned from exposure to sun and wind. Why put yourself through such suffering when you do not have to? No one is forcing you to run. Marcus had laughed, even though he was clearly exhausted beyond anything had ever experienced. Because it feels amazing when you finish. The pain is temporary, but the achievement lasts forever. When I cross that finish line, I know I did something that most people cannot do. I pushed past my limits and found there was more of me on the other side. But you could die doing these things. The risk is real. Everyone dies eventually, Ambassador. That is just a fact of existence. The question is whether you truly lived first. I would rather live fully and die young than survive carefully and never know what I was capable of. This was the human philosophy in its purest form. They did not fear death the way other species did. They feared not living. They feared a safe life that never challenged them, never pushed them, never showed them what they could become. And so they pushed themselves constantly, always reaching for more, never satisfied with staying where they were. It made them absolutely terrifying to species that prioritized safety and comfort. But it also made them incredibly valuable allies when danger came. When the Void Horde emerged from the dark space between galaxies, it was the humans who stood against them first, while other species still debated what to do. The Void Horde was an enemy unlike anything the Empire had faced in all its long history. They were not a species in the normal sense, not a civilization that could be negotiated with or intimidated. They were a swarm, a vast collective of countless billions of creatures that consumed everything in their path to fuel their endless expansion. They did not negotiate or trade or make peace. They did not respond to threats or offers of surrender. They simply fed on matter and energy and produced more of themselves, spreading like a plague across any territory they entered. The Empire's fleets met them at the border systems and were destroyed in devastating defeats. The proud warships of the Kreks, built for strength and armed with the most powerful weapons available, were overwhelmed by sheer numbers. The fast attack vessels of the Melani, designed to strike and withdraw before enemies could respond, found that the Horde simply kept coming no matter how many were destroyed. The ancient dreadnoughts of the Vithrani, ships that had served for thousands of years, fell before waves of creatures that seemed to care nothing for their own losses. Within 6 months, the Horde had consumed 3 inhabited systems entirely. Billions of citizens of the Empire were dead or fled, their homes reduced to barren rocks, and the Horde was still advancing, moving steadily toward the heart of Empire territory. Panic spread faster than the enemy. Species that had been allies for millennia began to argue over increasingly scarce resources. They fought over escape routes, over defensive positions, over who should be sacrificed to slow the Horde's advance while others fled. Ancient grudges resurfaced as fear broke down the cooperation that had held the Empire together. The Empire was falling apart from within, even as the enemy approached from outside. And then the humans stepped forward with a proposal. The human ambassador to the High Council was a man named James Okonkwo. He was tall and broad, with dark skin and a calm voice that carried across any room without needing to be raised. Had worked with him for 3 years in various diplomatic capacities and had come to respect him deeply. He was intelligent, patient, and utterly unflappable in crisis. "High Council," Okonkwo said, standing in the center of the chamber while chaos swirled around him and representatives shouted at each other. "Earth offers a proposal for how to defeat this enemy. What can humans possibly do that our combined fleets could not?" demanded Lord Kethfer. The Kreks had lost more ships than any other species in the war so far. His pride was wounded badly, and he was looking for someone to blame for the defeats he could not accept. "We can do what we have always done," Okonkwo said, his voice cutting through the noise. "We can endure. We can persist. We can keep fighting when everyone else has given up hope." "Pretty words and nothing more," Kethfer sneered. "Words do not destroy enemy ships." These are not just words. This is strategy based on understanding our enemy. Okonkwo activated a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber with light. The horde is fast, faster than any of our ships can outrun. Every time we engage them in direct combat, they overwhelm us with numbers that seem endless, but they have a weakness that we can exploit. The display showed the movement patterns of the horde over the past 6 months, tracking their advance across the border systems. They must feed constantly to maintain their vast numbers. If they do not consume matter and energy, they weaken and eventually die. This is why they advance so quickly toward inhabited systems. They cannot stop to rest or consolidate. They must keep moving and keep feeding, or they will collapse. How does understanding this help us? Asked Fleet Admiral Zekstani. We cannot starve them if they keep consuming our worlds. Because we can stop advancing. We can retreat to heavily fortified positions and wait. We can stretch their supply lines until they become too thin to maintain. We do not need to defeat them in battle. We need to outlast them. A defensive strategy could take decades, someone said, perhaps longer. Yes, Okonkwo agreed without hesitation. It very likely could. Are you prepared to fight for decades if that is what victory requires? Silence fell over the chamber as the representatives absorbed this question. Crystal watched the faces around him. He could see the doubt and uncertainty in their expressions. Most species in the Empire thought in terms of months or years when planning military campaigns. The idea of committing to a war that might last for decades was almost incomprehensible to them. It went against every instinct to extend a fight that long. But not to humans. For humans, this was simply how things were done when the stakes were high enough. Humans have fought wars that lasted a century, Okonkwo continued. We have struggled against enemies for generations, passing the fight from parent to child to grandchild without ever accepting defeat. We have pursued goals for hundreds of years without giving up. We do not surrender. We do not stop. Give us command of your fleets and we will win this war. Not quickly, not easily, not without tremendous cost, but we will win because we will never stop fighting until we do. You ask for command of the Empire's entire military. Vexthun's voice was heavy with disbelief at the scope of this request. Yes, because we are the only species in this empire who truly understands persistence at the level this enemy requires. You have all read the histories about our evolution, our nature, our psychology. Now give us the chance to prove what we can do. The debate lasted for 3 full days without pause, spoke repeatedly in favor of the human proposal. So did Zekstani and, surprisingly, Florath. The Florani understood patience in ways most species did not, even if they could not match human physical endurance. In the end, desperation won over tradition. The humans were given command of all Empire military forces. And the Long War began. 20 years. That was how long the war against the Void Horde lasted. 20 years of fighting, retreating, regrouping, and fighting again. 20 years of sacrifices and losses that would have broken any other species in the galaxy. 20 years of persistence applied on a scale that made ancient Earth hunts look like brief sprints. Crystal was old now. The Vithrani did not live as long as many species in the Empire, and the war had taken years from him that he would never get back. His exoskeleton was faded, his movements slower, his compound eyes dimmer than they once were. But he had survived when so many had not. He stood on the observation deck of the human flagship Endurance, watching the final battle unfold in the space below. The last major concentration of the Void Horde was trapped in a system with no exit. Human ships surrounded them on all sides, patient as always, waiting for the inevitable end. The Horde had been reduced from billions of creatures to mere millions over the Long War. Every time they had tried to break out and reach new feeding grounds, human forces would fall back just enough to stay out of reach, lead them on a chase that stretched for months across empty space, and then trap them again with reinforcements that seemed to come from nowhere. The humans never engaged in battles they could not win. They never took risks that might give the Horde an advantage. They simply kept the pressure on, kept the enemy moving, kept them burning energy they could not replace. They just kept coming, day after day, month after month, year after year. Fleet Admiral Sarah Chen, the same woman who had first addressed the council 30 years ago, stood beside Crystal at the observation window. Her hair was completely gray now, and her face was lined with the weight of age and responsibility. But her eyes were as sharp and determined as they had been when she was young. She had led this war for 2 decades without ever wavering. "It is almost over," Crystal said, watching the trapped horde struggle weakly against the forces surrounding them. "Almost," Chen agreed. "Another few months, maybe a year at most. They are starving. They cannot maintain their numbers without feeding, and we have cut them off from any source of matter. Every day they get weaker. Every day we get closer to victory." 20 years, Crystal said quietly. "Most species in the Empire would have given up long ago. They would have made peace or fled or simply accepted defeat." Chen turned to look at him. "We are not most species." "No, you are certainly not." Below them, the Horde tried one more desperate breakout attempt. Human ships moved to intercept, not rushing, not hurrying. They had all the time in the universe. The Horde did not. "May I ask you something personal?" Crystal said. "Of course, old friend." "Was it difficult, keeping up the fight for so long? 20 years is a significant portion of a human life." Chen was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the stars. "Yes, there were times when I wanted to give up. Times when the losses seemed too great to bear, the enemy too strong to defeat, the end too far away to imagine. I lost friends. I lost family. I lost people I loved." She paused, her voice becoming softer. "But then I remembered what my grandmother told me when I was a child, back on Earth." "What did she say?" "She said that humans are like rivers. We seem soft and gentle when you look at us, easy to push aside, easy to stop. But given enough time, rivers can wear down mountains. We just have to keep flowing, keep pushing, keep moving forward no matter what obstacles we find in our path. Eventually, the obstacles break. Not us." Crystal clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "Your grandmother sounds like she was a very wise woman." "She was. She died in the first year of the war when the Horde hit the colony on New Beijing. 500,000 people died that day. I have been fighting for her ever since, for her and for everyone else we lost." 20 years of vengeance. Chen shook her head slowly. 20 years of persistence. There is a difference, Ambassador. Vengeance burns hot and fast and consumes itself. Persistence is cold and steady and never runs out of fuel. Crystal did not ask her to explain further. He thought he understood what she meant. The final battle was not dramatic or exciting to watch. The Horde, weakened and starving after years of being hunted, could not break through the human lines. They tried again and again, each attempt weaker and more desperate than the last. And each time, the humans pushed them back into their shrinking trap. In the end, the last of the Void Horde simply stopped moving. They had exhausted themselves completely, burned out all their energy trying to escape an enemy that would never, ever stop pursuing them. They died not from weapons but from exhaustion, just like the prey animals on ancient Earth had died at the end of those long hunts. The greatest threat the Galactic Empire had ever faced died not with a roar but with a whimper. And the humans stood victorious. The celebrations that followed lasted for months across every world in the Empire. Every species praised the humans, thanked them, honored them with the highest awards they could bestow. Statues were built on 100 planets. Holidays were declared that would be celebrated for generations. Songs were written in 100 languages about the brave humans who had saved galactic civilization from extinction. But Crystal noticed something that many others missed in the festivities. The humans did not celebrate like the other species did. They did not boast about their victory or demand rewards for their sacrifice. They did not parade through the streets accepting adulation or give speeches about their greatness. They simply acknowledged the end of the war and then moved on to the next task that needed doing. There were colonies to rebuild, trade routes to restore, wounded veterans to heal, dead to mourn and bury properly. For them, the celebration was less important than the work that remained. "Does it not feel good to be heroes?" Crystal asked James Okonkwo at a ceremony honoring the human commanders. Okonkwo had served as the diplomatic liaison throughout the entire war, bridging the gap between human military leadership and the Empire's civilian government. He looked almost as tired and old as Crystal felt. "It feels good to be finished," Okonkwo said honestly. "But we are not heroes, not the way you mean. We just did what we always do. We kept going until the job was done. That is more than most species could have done. You know this." "Perhaps, but for us it is simply normal. We do not know how to give up. It is not a choice we make. It is simply who we are at our deepest level. Our ancestors did not choose to be persistence hunters. They became persistence hunters because it was the only way to survive. And now, millions of years later, we are still running." Thought about this conversation for a long time after the ceremony ended. He thought about everything he had learned about humans over the past 30 years. Their persistence, their endurance, their absolute refusal to accept defeat no matter how long the odds or how difficult the struggle. And he realized something important. The Galactic Empire had been afraid of humans when they first arrived, afraid of their history of violence, afraid of their persistence hunter nature, afraid of their potential to become unstoppable enemies. And that fear had been justified. The humans were exactly as dangerous as everyone had feared. But fear was not the right response to what the humans represented. The right response was gratitude. Because in a universe full of dangers, a universe where threats like the Void Horde could emerge from the darkness at any moment, it was very, very good to have allies who would never give up fighting for you. Crystal found Sarah Chen alone after the official ceremony had ended. She was sitting on a balcony overlooking the capital city of the Empire's central world, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. "Admiral," he said, "may I join you?" "Of course, Ambassador, please." He settled his old body into a seat beside her. They watched the colors change in the sky for a while without speaking, two old warriors from very different worlds, sharing a moment of peace. "I have something to say," Crystal finally said. "Something I should have said 30 years ago when you first addressed the council and told us about your ancestors." "What is that?" "Welcome to the Galactic Empire, humans of Earth. We are truly glad you are here." Chen looked at him with surprise that slowly transformed into a genuine smile. It was warm and tired and full of meaning that transcended their different biologies. "Thank you, Ambassador. It is good to be here. It is good to finally belong." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the sun disappear below the horizon as the stars emerged one by one in the darkening sky. The same stars that humans had once looked up at and dreamed of reaching. The same stars they had pursued with characteristic persistence until they finally arrived. The galaxy was safe now, not because of superior weapons or overwhelming numbers or natural advantages that evolution had provided, but because somewhere in the endless dark between stars, there was a species that would never stop running. A species that had been chasing prey across the plains of Africa for millions of years and had never learned how to give up. And they were on the Empire's side. Forever,